The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Are we close to seeing Mr. Kim here at the White House?
Could happen. I mean,
they talked about that yesterday.
I would have him. Yeah, I think it's something that could happen. Yeah. Hey, he's the head of a country, and I mean, he's the strong head. Mm-hmm. Don't let anyone think anything different. Right. He speaks, and his people sit up at attention. I want my people to do the same.
That was President Trump on Fox and Friends this morning, directly from the White House in a special interview. And yeah, I mean, you heard what you heard. There's no way to fix that or to there's no spin necessary. We know that Donald Trump has authoritarian, dictatorial leanings, and now he admires Chairman Kim so much that he wants what Kim has. You know, there's so many ways to go with this, but let's just start with the obvious. Donald Trump is both a moron and a dangerous individual. He is a moron enough to think that he can get away with these types of ideas and not just having the ideas, which is problematic, right? You know, oh, Ben, you're the thought police. Yeah, when the president of the United States is ruminating over whether or not he could be a dictator, that is something we should police. Right. But also in the way that he is using the culture wars to implement this. He has created a cult of personality around him where people who support him will literally do anything that he says. They go along with this. And I'm talking about that core support group who find it more valuable to bow down before Donald Trump in exchange, rather, for owning the libs. They'd give up their freedoms in the name of owning liberals. So that's one part of the culture war that he's using, or the cult of personality that's a part of the culture war. The reason he has this cult of personality is because of the relentless culture war that he wages. And the other part of the culture war that actually shows how dangerous this train of thought is when you consider he's trying to force these NFL players to come out and stand at attention during the national anthem. I'm starting to get it now. He doesn't see it as a level of disrespect to the flag so much as he sees it as disrespect to him. He doesn't see it so much as a disrespect to the national anthem as he sees it as a matter of disrespecting him. This is, I mean, my favorite phrase is, this is where we are, right? This is where we are. And this particular area, this is particularly different than any other president in my lifetime. There's so much that people go through to try to draw an equivalence between Donald Trump and Barack Obama so that they don't have to find themselves indirectly supporting Democrats. It's more important for them to try to wash away any differences, no matter how stark those differences are, in order for them to always be able to slam on Democrats, because more than anything else, they don't want to indirectly or directly, for that matter, be supportive of Democrats. And so in order for, and I'm not talking about Donald Trump supporters at this point, I'm talking about people who find themselves still frustrated from the 2016 election, or frustrated from the administration of Barack Obama and for all it was worth, good and bad. You have a group of people who are willing to turn a blind eye to this and say, oh, it's nothing. Well, I'm sorry. Listen, we have had the president of the United States attack our media relentlessly. Whether you like the media or not, to have the executive branch of the United States of America attacking our media is a clear affront to our First Amendment. Like all this other stuff that Sam Adams, or not Sam Adams, but the other Sam Harris, the Dave Rubins, and the entire Jordan Peterson, the entire intellectual dark web, so-called, all that they complain about being a violation of the First Amendment, none of that is a violation of the First Amendment. That is competing First Amendments. That is competing free speech. That is Antifa's free speech to the right to assemble and to challenge Nazis' free speech. And then whoever shouts the loudest wins. But where the real violation of free speech is occurring is coming directly from the White House. It's an attack on the media. It is an attack on the NFL players, trying to force them to end their protest. And yet we have people who are ostensibly more left libertarians than anything else, who are going to be silent about the president of the United States, not just admiring a dictator, but aspiring to be a dictator. It's one thing to say, well, I'm going to be cordial with this dictator, and I'm going to flatter him for the sake of trying to foster better relations and to chill the remaining parts of to warm up the remaining parts of the Cold War and to negotiate a denuclearization process. That's one thing. Fine. Right? I have no problem. That's actually admirable. That's what he should do. That's what Barack Obama said that he was going to do, and the right attacked him relentlessly, but I digress. That's not the point. It's one thing for Donald Trump to do that. It's another thing for him to now aspire to be like the dictator. And yet, in the face of these clear dictatorial overtures, these clear violations of the First Amendment from the White House that would drive the right to aneurysms, they would be so furious that they would have aneurysms. I'm not talking about the hypocrisy. I'm just showing you that there are people who are on the left, libertarian left. There's so many variations of the left that it's almost stupid, right? But there's so many people on the left who are convinced that it's more important for them to continuously equate Donald Trump to Barack Obama. That nothing that Donald Trump is doing is worse than what anything Barack Obama did. And on days like this, I guarantee you they're quiet, that they're not saying anything because they know in their hearts that this is obscene. Or if they say anything, they're going to say it's not a big deal. How the hell is a president who's clearly shown that he has no problem violating our freedom of speech, no problem violating our freedom to the press, no problem trying to force people at attention against their will, saying that he admires North Korean dictators' ability to speak and his people stand at attention? No, he's not talking about the military because they do that already. He's not talking about his staff because his staff does that already. He's talking about the American people.
I thought I'd take a little bit of digression here to discuss some concerns raised by our church friends about separation of families. Many of the criticisms raised in recent days are not fair, not logical, and some are contrary to plain law. First, illegal entry into the United States is a crime. It should be, it must be, if you're going to have a legal system and have any limits whatsoever. Persons who violate the law of our nation are subject to prosecution. If you violate the law, you subject yourself to prosecution. And I would cite you to the Apostle Paul and his clear and wise command in Romans 13 to obey the laws of the government because God has ordained the government for his purposes. Orderly and lawful processes are good in themselves. Consistent, fair application of law is in itself a good and moral thing, and that protects the weak. It protects the lawful.
There are two different ways that we have to talk about that clip that we just heard of Attorney General Jeff Sessions as he explains biblically why it is okay for the Trump administration to separate families. There's two things in this clip that we have to discuss. I'm going to get to the biblical portion in a moment, but I first want to talk about this being another example of where we erroneously draw a false equivalence between Barack Obama and Donald Trump, particularly in their immigration policies. What's going on right now is that the Trump administration is instituting a new policy, not a law. It is a departure from the Obama administration. It is a zero tolerance policy at the border, even for asylum seekers. In the case of asylum seekers, they are now prosecuting every single person who comes into this country seeking asylum, whereas before They may have been prosecuted. They may have been, generally, if they were prosecuted, they were held in detention centers with their families. And then once they went before a judge, they were either pardoned and released into America, into the population, what Republicans called catch and release, or they were sent back and their case for asylum was denied and they were sent back to their countries as a family. Now, Donald Trump is immediately, his administration, they have a zero tolerance. And this is critical, right? They ran on catch and release. The only thing that was really catch and release was in the case of asylum seekers. And there's U.S. law as well as international law that demands that we treat asylum seekers uniquely, separate from other people who are just crossing the border. And from Central America, because of all that's going on in Central America, there have been hundreds of families, thousands of families that have come to the United States seeking asylum. And now in the Trump administration, they have a zero tolerance policy. They separate the children from the parents because they have to prosecute the parents. They end up putting the children in detention centers separate from their parents. The stories are horrifying of how it happens. There was one Honduran man whose family was ripped from him and he ended up killing himself in the detention center. One mother recently was reported breastfeeding a child and an ICE agent snatched the baby in the middle of feeding a child and separated the families. I mean, the horrors go on and on and on. And it's critical that we understand the difference between this policy and what was going on underneath the Obama administration, because what happens every single time you let people draw these false equivalences is that nothing happens. Every time someone brings up a whataboutism or a false equivalence and they try to say, oh, it's the same as that thing, it is literally a tool of neutralization. They are attempting to neutralize any action, I don't care what their intentions are. What happens is that they neutralize a collective anger, which leads to action, to changing policies like this. And so in this case, they're saying, oh, this has been the same thing since President Obama was in office. No, it absolutely is not. For some people crossing the border illegally, yes, because they're not coming seeking asylum. But in the specific cases of families who are leaving atrocities in their home in Central America, generally in Central America right now, they cross into the United States. They are treated now as criminals and their children are taken away from the parents, and the parents have to go through an entire legal process while the children are either in detention or shipped off to a foster home. And now it's coming out of all of these facilities that are making millions of dollars off of taxpayer money holding children in detention cells. There's a video of a reporter who went to an abandoned Walmart or a refurbished Walmart where there's, I believe, like 400,000 square feet of open air facilities inside of a Walmart. And not open air, but you understand what I'm saying. And only small portions of it is used to detain hundreds of children. It's a nonprofit and they make hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, they make millions of dollars off of detaining these children. But that's besides this point. The point is that separation process for asylum seekers is uniquely different. It is unique to the Trump administration. It is something that they do not have to do. It is something that they are doing to pacify the Stephen Millers of the world. Stephen Miller is the young bigoted special assistant to the president, whose number one target was immigrants. And here we are treating asylum seekers, people who, if they go back to their country, chances are they could be killed, which is why they left in the first place. But we can't get a collective movement from the left to challenge this because people are so damn convinced that everything that Donald Trump does is either the same as what President Obama did or in some weird way better. I'm going to talk about the left in a minute, but let's finish talking about this insidiousness from the right. I think it's critical that we understand the actual differences. The pictures that came out of 2014, they were of detention centers, and our immigration system is horrible. The way we treat quote unquote illegal immigrants is horrible. The way we did it under President Obama was bad. But the way that they are doing it underneath Donald Trump is atrocious. And if we don't see the difference, then we are complicit with what's happening right now and what's going to radicalize the next generation of young people who are being ripped away from their parents and treated like animals inside of our borders. Can you imagine what that's doing to thousands of kids who are being treated in this manner? There is a difference. We were not, it was not a utopia underneath President Obama. It wasn't even good underneath President Obama. It was far as hell away from a utopia as you can imagine. But what we are allowing Donald Trump's administration to continuously do is appalling. It is a game. It is a sport. The ICE agents are lying to parents saying that, oh, we're going to give them a bath, and then they never see their children again. The ICE agents are mocking these people saying, oh, your family's done. You'll never see your family again. It is a game for sadistic and malicious people who get off on hurting other human beings. And they do it just like their barbaric and disgusting leader, Jeff Sessions. They do it with the sense of they're doing God's work and they're doing something noble. This is how twisted this is. I want to play another portion of that same clip that you just heard so we could talk about the next part.
And I would cite you to the Apostle Paul and his clear and wise command in Romans 13 to obey the laws of the government because God has ordained the government for his purposes. Orderly and lawful processes are good in themselves.
Okay, so what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to give you a list of all of the many scriptures that contradict what he's saying or how he's using what he's saying right now. We have no requirement as Christians or as Americans, obviously, but as Christians, we have no requirement to obey unjust laws. And these laws are rightly pointed out by some Christians and even some white evangelicals who I slam on a regular basis. They're pointing at least to this. At least this is the breaking point for them, right? Nothing else really bothers them, but apparently separating families bothers them. Oh, they have a soul. Praise God. But they look to this and they see that this is an atrocity. This is something that America is going to be held accountable for. This is what Jeremiah Wright was preaching about when he said, "God damn America." Right there, we can't do just anything and everything in the name of America and expect God to bless it if you're a Christian. And finally, there's a handful of evangelicals who are like, Jeff Sessions, you're going too far. I mean, okay, at least they're there. Let me leave them alone. All right. So I'm not going to quote all the scriptures that contradict what he says. I'm not going to quote the scriptures that tell you that you should treat the quote unquote alien from the King James Bible, treat them with love and all those things, because there's plenty of people who are doing that. I think Stephen Colbert did a segment. I know I've seen like articles written. There's so much that's going to be said about this. What I want you to pay attention to how it's being used and how it's been used throughout history. The Bible. It has been used intentionally by people in power to control and to either protect their power or to further project their power. It's been used for colonization. It's been used for the justification of slavery. It was literally used in a similar fashion in Nazi Germany. It is quite literally a tool that can be used for any purposes. And what the powerful do is they intentionally ignore all of the calls in the Bible for justice, for social justice, for the captive to be set free, for those in prison to be liberated. I mean, they literally ignore all of the calls for economic justice, the year of Jubilee, where everyone's debts, no matter who you owe or how much you owe, it is absolved. Every 50 years, whatever you owe or your family owes is just completely absolved. Of course, there's not going to be a single white American evangelical man who's going to abide by that law because capitalism. So what they have done historically is exactly what we see him doing. And if you watch the video, you see the little smug Klansman of a Keebler elf looking. I mean, you see him laughing because he's giddy that he's getting an opportunity to hurt these families. And now he's getting an opportunity to justify it using the Bible. This is what they live for. This is what they dream of. We are not dealing with reasonable people, and we can't play games of being politically correct by being nice to them. Those are that's the political correctness that is wrong. It is entirely wrong for us to be politically correct so much that we are afraid to call these bastards the bastards that they are. Or we are afraid to chase them out of office, chase them out of the temples like Jesus did. Nobody's going to quote that scripture. Chasing the capitalists out of the temple, out of the administration. The temple wasn't just a place of prayer. It was a place of administration. It was a place of leadership. It was the government. And so we're dealing with people who are unreasonable, and we're dealing with people who are manipulative, and we're dealing with the classical case of people who will use the Bible in order to maintain their power, to further project their power, like colonialization, and to hurt the least of these, to get joy. These, I swear to God, they get joy out of hurting people. You do not, I mean, maybe you do, but for those of you who don't, I'm yelling at you. You don't understand. They get joy and pleasure out of hurting people. I've talked with them. I've sat next to them in debates and arguments, and they honestly get off on what Donald Trump is doing to hurt people. They enjoy the racism. The racism is a game to them. They are not broke. They are not hurt economically. They are some of the wealthiest people in our country, and they are getting off on what Donald Trump is doing to hurt the least of these in our nation, in our world. And they are using now the Bible as justification for their barbarism. What do we do about it? We vote them the hell out of office. And we continue to beat the Democrats up across the head so that they not only change what Donald Trump did, they change what Barack Obama did wrong. That's what we do. But we do not get into a self-righteous, holier or more progressive than thou hypocrisy, in my opinion, where we just sit there and we say, oh, it's just as bad as it was underneath Barack Obama, you fatuous tool. No, it is worse. And the same anger that we have about this that you're trying to neutralize is the same anger that we could use to fix all the things that Barack Obama did do wrong. But what you're doing is that you're attempting to neutralize any action except the action that you approve of.
Don't you have any empathy for what these people are going through? They have less than you do.
Guys,
Sarah, come on,
settle down.
Seriously.
I'm trying to be serious, but I'm not going to have you yell out of turn. Jill, please call.
It's a law, and they have, these people have nothing.
Hey, Ryan, I know you want to get some more TV time, but that's not what this is about. If I want to recognize you, go ahead, Jill.
Honestly, answer the question. It's a serious question. These people have nothing. They come to the border with nothing, and you throw children in cages. You're a parent. You're a parent of young children. Don't you have any empathy for what they go through?
Jill, go ahead. Your question.
That was Brian Karem, White House reporter, CNN correspondent. Also, I believe he writes for Playboy, asking Sarah Huckabee Sanders the questions that we should have been asking all along. And he's asking it with the energy and the passion that we should carry in every single thing that we do, especially in the face of such barbarism, in the face of such depravity wrapped in the name of God. I really hope that the voices that get pushed up to the top are not those that continuously whataboutism. They what about our way right into the arms of an even greater atrocity. So yes, it matters that things were bad underneath Barack Obama. But then if it bothered you then, it should infuriate you now. What on earth possesses you besides being a contrarian or besides doing it for clicks and likes? What on earth possesses you to be calm about things being worse than the time and period in time when you thought things were the worst? We've got to do better. That's all the time I have for you today. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. Like I say every episode, it is always a pleasure. Thanks for giving me your time to listen to what I believe about the issues. Have a great weekend, everyone. Over the weekend, if you get some time, go to patreon.com/the BPD show and become a patron as we continue to speak truth to power, no matter where that power resides. Take care, everyone. We'll see you Monday.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.